If you were advising Gillard, what would be the first thing that you would do?
Well, the first thing to say is it's not about what newspapers say. It's about what the public think. And look, you have a very lively, robust media in this country, but it is pretty biased against her and against the Labour Party. And I think the public aim off for that. I think the public know that. But you've got to have a... I can remember, in fact, I'm doing this speech in Melbourne on Thursday to the Centre for Corporate Public Affairs, and one of the things I'm going to say is this quote that Clinton said when I did an interview with him after he'd stopped being president when his book came out. And he said this thing: too many of today's decision makers define their reality according to that day's media. It's always a mistake. And that is totally right. So don't think of it in terms of this newspaper said this and this newspaper said that. Political parties and governments have to have a set of their own objectives. They have to have a clear strategy to meet it, and they've just got to keep going with that. Now, my point about Julia Gillard, I totally understand that it's very, very difficult to do that when you've just got all this noise around you all the time. You can break through that noise, and I think she could break through that noise if the division stuff went away. Because ultimately, I mean, if I was an Australian, I've only been here a couple of days, if I was an Australian, I would be pretty bored rigid with this stuff. It just seems to go on and on and on. It's like and once the public think that politicians are there worrying about themselves rather than worrying about the people, then it becomes very, very difficult.
The big sort of political buzz story today is about the photograph of Julia Gillard knitting a baby kangaroo for the royal baby. What would you make of that? Do you think that was good political advice to go ahead with that?
Well, I've got to say, it's certainly screams out at you from the front page. And I think that, you see, I'll go back to the point I just made to you. In the end, if within her team they've made the decision that they want to get her out there, being thought about, looked at in a different way, then I can see that as being part of this strategy. If it's just a sort of tactical thing to say, let's show Julia in a different light, then that won't work. But I suspect it is part of a broader strategy. So I wouldn't, you know, when I saw it, my first reaction was, oh my God, the press are going to have a field day with that, which they are having. But I suspect the public will think, oh, it's quite interesting. And you have to dominate the agenda. You do, particularly going to election. You've got to start dominating the agenda. And what I would say is, if you can get clear of this noise, if the whole kind of Kevin thing can be sorted one way or another, and then if you can get the connection made in the public mind between the fact that Australia is doing pretty well and the government, you then set out a programme for the future, and the other part that's missing here, you attack your opponents, because of course they're attacking Abbott and his team, but nobody's paying much attention because there's this other kind of drama going on. There was a guy who was driving me around yesterday who was, I would characterise as quite a sort of bluff, tough Australian guy. And he made the point that he thought he'd heard, I'd been doing some interviews in the back of the car and he'd been listening to what I was saying and so forth. And he just said, you know, some of this is to do with the fact she's a woman. And I suspect that is partly true. I think there is a bit of a nastiness to some of the commentary and some of the coverage that I think is a bit over the top. But again, you get used to that, I think. But I do think that there are, look, I think just as a general rule, I think there are too few women leaders. I think there are too few women in senior positions in politics. But I don't, when I met her yesterday and the impressions that I had, in a way, the kind of the fact that she was a woman was, to me, sort of neither here nor there. What I really liked about her was this sense of calm and resilience in this very, very difficult set of circumstances that she's found herself. So, but I think that the, you know, if the choice that seems to me Australia's got is between a, you know, it's the same choice that you have around the world. Do you want to be a progressive government or a conservative government? And I'm always going to support the progressives, and I think you would. I don't know much about Abbott, and I think that's wrong. And I think what's happened is that actually he's not been put under the sustained sort of pressure that somebody who's standing to be the Prime Minister of a country as important as Australia should be.